The MLB trade deadline is rapidly approaching. The Philadelphia Phillies still have some work to do to upgrade their roster to true World Series contenders. We have an interesting report that surfaced connecting the Phillies to a surprising outfielder that the author believes could be the difference maker from a playoff perspective. We have seen for several years now that every weakness is put on full display in the playoff setting, and Cedric Mullins is theorized to be the guy that could get the Phillies over the hump. I want to dive into exactly what the author is thinking on that, kind of talk through my thought process of the deadline, what the priorities must be. There is certainly a stronger case to be made about the bullpen being a position of need following the Jose Alvarado suspension there. And of course, the outfield still has not been quite a solidified position here. There have been some ups and downs with Max Kepler. Certainly has had a couple highs that are worth noting and something I think is worth sticking with him to this point, but certainly not a guy that I think should be penciled in as the clear-cut everyday starter from a postseason perspective. And of course, doing the same dance out in center field with Brandon Marsh and Johan Rojas, kind of alternating days, each getting their opportunity, and neither one being quite able to seize it, although I will give Brandon Marsh his credit that his bat has been much better since he returned from that funk that he started the season on. So I do want to dive into what specifically this article does discuss here, but before I do want to remind you guys always to make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. And at this point in time, only 27.4% of you guys watching these videos have subscribed to us here at Phillies Digest just yet. We are in the full stretch of the season. We got plenty more baseball to break down and hopefully a pretty exciting postseason at the conclusion of it all. So I want as many of you along for the ride as possible, and let's get into the story of today. So first, I want to start off with this headline, this article from Sportscasting here that writes, Phillies predicted to trade for Orioles All-Star Silver Slugger at key position. And that, of course, being Cedric Mullins. Now, the article as a whole kind of theorizes and talks about their past thought process at the trade deadline. One of my personal frustrations with Dave Dombrowski here is he has not been a guy who has pushed the chips in at any point. Now, granted, there is certainly an argument to be made that the better tactic, or from a long-term perspective of an organization, is get as many bites of the apple as you can. That maybe going all in for one season, and then if it works, you look like a genius. But if it doesn't, you're in a tough spot. And I do think he's sort of spread out the opportunity to an extent here. And the other thing that I will note there is it's very different from what I expected from Dave Dombrowski. That the reputation of this guy who's been around baseball for the entirety of his life, seemingly, a guy who's well-established and well-respected across the league, the reputation that he has held is a general manager who tears up farm system, that he is going to make those big ticket trades, that he is going to wheel and deal and kind of empty the young talent that an organization does has. And the opposite has happened here in Philadelphia, that frankly, the farm system, the minor leagues are in a far better place since Dave Dombrowski took over, and that's not something I expected. But nonetheless, to jump into the story of today, do want to walk through the thought process here. And again, this connecting to their past decision-making at the deadline. And it writes, the Phillies love their roster and team chemistry, and last season they didn't mess with either much of the trade deadline. Outside of the bullpen additions, that being Carlos Estevez, their main trade acquisition was Austin Hayes, who wasn't getting that much playing time in a crowded Baltimore Orioles outfield. The Hayes addition didn't work out, due in large part to injury, but the outfield is once again a need, with center field standing out as an issue. Could the Phillies go right back to the well by trading with the Orioles? In a recent YouTube video, Jim Riley of Ballcap Sports predicted that the Phillies would trade for Orioles center fielder Cedric Mullins, a former All-Star and Silver Slugger, who will be a free agent at the end of the year. Quote, to get through the National League side of the postseason bracket is going to be one hell of a gauntlet. Can't be weak anywhere, Riley said. Philly's going to have to be aggressive. I like them to grab Mullins. And the article continues to state, Mullins, 30, has had a solid 226, 320, and 446 slash line this season with 10 home runs and 31 RBIs. His defense has been quite up to his usual standards, so the advanced defensive metrics will be something to monitor if the Phillies are serious about acquiring him. The Orioles are 18-34, so barring a miracle turnaround, Mullins should be available. But the Phillies would have to decide whether it's worth rocking the boat to bring him in as the starter over Brandon Marsh. Now, to talk about Cedric Mullins as a whole, first I'll note his full stats for this season, which he does have 10 home runs, 31 RBIs, a 320 on-base percentage there. In his 177 at-bats this season, he has 40 hits, 23 walks, 7 stolen bases. He has struck out 50 times, which is a bit higher of a number that I would personally prefer here. When we talk about the options at center field currently, it obviously comes down to Johan Rojas and Brandon Marsh here. Now, Rojas, we know what he brings to the table defensively, and I do think he deserves a bit more credit for what he has brought to the table offensively this season, that I do think he's been swinging the bat at least better, although he certainly is not going to be walking away with a Silver Slugger anytime soon. But we're looking at his numbers, a 307 on-base percentage across his 91 at-bats, has 23 hits, has struck out 27 times, does have 12 RBIs, which I think is worth noting there. The slugging percentage at 330 is not too appealing there. And then to highlight Brandon Marsh, in his 89 at bats, does have 20 hits, 12 walks, 1 home run, 10 RBIs, just 1 stolen base, and has struck out 28 times. Still just 27 years old, but I do think we kind of got to acknowledge that Brandon Marsh is who he is at this point. And I think in an ideal world, unfortunately, Brandon Marsh's best role is probably as a fourth outfielder. I think he's a great guy to have as a locker around a clubhouse, a guy that certainly can fill in and pulls his weight defensively. And again, the bat has been very good of late since he did have that little stint with the hamstring injury or whatever it was, a mental health clear your head that he was struggling at the plate. Whatever the case may be, when he did return, he has looked like a better version of himself. That does not mean that I do believe that is the difference maker from a postseason perspective, but I think where my momentum stops on this argument is I'm not really confident that Cedric Mullins is either. Now, to dive into a little bit of his stats overall, there's no doubt that he has a more polished resume than any of the Phillies options at this point. This is a guy who's been a Silver Slugger, who was an All-Star back in 2021, but not quite the guy that I view as the difference maker for getting the Phillies over the edge. To look at what he's done on the season across the whole, we kind of ran through a bunch of these numbers overall, but did want to note defensively, it mentioned that he's not like what he has been. When you look up the Cedric Mullins like all-time reels here, he's robbing home runs, he's sliding, he has some really impressive kind of performances from a defensive perspective. And I think getting a little bit more balance is appealing there. But I do think the Phillies can be pretty careful with the ammunition that they do have from a trade perspective here. There's some really tough conversations to be had. Mick Abel is a really interesting one to me. We've seen him pitch unbelievable in his MLB debut, and I do think that was pretty calculated to be a showcase moment for the Phillies. That obviously pitching is a strength for this team. When you look up and down the depth chart, that we know the names that we have. Zack Wheeler, Christopher Sanchez, of course, Andrew Painter is still looming out there. Jesus Luzardo has been one of the best in baseball. There will be an interesting Aaron Nola conversation to get into as he starts to near his return from the injured list there. And Ranger Suarez, we cannot forget about either. There's a lot of depth there. And the fact that they are being so calculated and careful with Painter's trajectory to this point does make me kind of believe that Mick Abel is expendable there. But then there's other guys that we do have to get into if you're trying to make these type of trades. Justin Crawford is probably a guy that organizations are going to want back, particularly if you are trading away an outfielder, in this case with the Orioles here. And of course, the Aiden Millers of the world. You can go down the list of a pretty, once again, stacked farm system that is surprising to me that the Phillies kind of have at this point, but that does not mean that you can just give those guys away for the wrong price here. So they're in a tough spot for this Phillies team. I do think the Alvarado suspension changed the equation in a major way. That I think prior to that, I certainly looked at outfield as the clear-cut top priority. If they can only make one or the other, I kind of lean more towards that bullpen has climbed up to the top of the list. And even acknowledging the bodies that we do have in the bullpen, and I still believe in the top-end guys to an extent. Jordan Romano, I think we're going to have to live with the ups and downs a little bit. My Jordan Romano feeling at this point is I can rock with him being a part of this bullpen picture. He just can't be the guy on an every-night basis, and I think that they've learned that lesson. And again, the most recent example of that stands out to me after an incredible stretch of baseball, that Romano has been pitching out of his mind for the large part for these past couple weeks here, but he did have his lone down performance in quite some time. Now, what I will stick up for Romano, on the Athletics field out there, I mean, the pitchers were complaining about that mound all series long, and I will give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there, that he did not look balanced to me whatsoever. And the other thing that I will note as kind of a positive here is it took me 3 pitches to be like, this guy doesn't have it today. And to Rob Thompson's credit, he did adjust and get him out of the game before it harmed this team. And then when you look kind of at the other guys, Orion Kirkring, there's a larger frustration with than I truly understand. Matt Strahm, I do think is a little bit fair to assess that he's taken a bit of a step back from last year, but that's kind of where the list ends when it goes as far as trust. Yes, we see some nice moments from the Jose Ruiz and Carlos Hernandez and Tanner Banks, even certainly seeing his role or expectations scaled up to higher leverage situations. But when factoring all these in, I do kind of wonder if the best route is for them to attack the bullpen more than the outfield. Ultimately, the bats going cold has been more of a reason why this Phillies team has not gone over the hump to this point. And frankly, that it does come down to if Bryce Harper can be Bryce Harper when the moment matters. If JT Realmuto, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Alec Boehm, those are the guys that need to step up. Shouldn't from an offensive perspective come down to Johan Rojas, Brandon Marsh, or Cedric Mullins being out there in center field. But nonetheless, every margin does matter. And I do think the Phillies should at least take some calls on this. So do want to hear from you guys in the comments, sort of your thought process on that. I still think I sit on the camp of that bullpen is the higher priority to me. I certainly get the argument the other way around, but would Cedric Mullins be a difference maker for you guys? Is this the type of trade you could see getting done? I don't think I'm as in on this one as the author is kind of theorizing here. This to me feels like, if anything, I was a little bit more optimistic about the Austin Hayes edition last year. And by the way, Austin Hayes playing some pretty incredible baseball this year with the Reds. So shout out to Austin Hayes. Kind of surprising to me that they traded for him and basically had no interest in re-signing him. Clearly, they believed in Kepler more than Hayes. I think Hayes got a little bit of a worse rep than he deserved here, and a guy that wasn't unable to showcase his full skill set due to the injuries and kidney infection that he was dealing with here. Some really strange circumstances. But the bottom line is, do want to hear from you guys in the comments for what you think about this potential trade. And as always, one more time, do want to make sure you guys are subscribing. Once again, 72.6% of you guys watching these videos have not subscribed to us here at Phillies Digest just yet. So make sure we keep this Phillies Digest family growing. We got plenty more to get into, and we'll be back to talk with you next time. Peace.